Good afternoon, everyone. LJ here, the Go Biz Guy, the podcast for entrepreneurs by entrepreneurs. Today, we're going to talk, I don't think it's politics, but we're going to talk about valor, and we're going to talk about the verse, and we're going to talk about poetic reflections. But I tell you what, I'm excited. And today we have with us Archie Looper. He's an executive director, a certified trainer for Maxwell Leadership. Archie's a certified facilitator, a speaker, and trains in the areas of leadership, team building, sales development, personal growth. Trained and mentored by John C. Maxwell himself and mentors of his world class facility. Archie is equipped with tools and resources and experience to help you and your team improve your productivity, performance, and profitability. He has two exclusive teaching content that is only available through certified executive director of Maxwell Leadership to help you reach your goals and objectives. Invest in training. Go to www.archielooper.com. So welcome, Archie. How are you doing?
Lauren Jordan, my good friend, I'm glad to be here. Glad to be with you today. Thanks for the opportunity to chat.
Yeah, and it's so lightning because we as we've talked before, we kind of grew up together and you were in the restaurant business, but today we're going to put focus to you being an author, and what a blessing that is because what really inspired you to write the verse and valor poetic reflections on presidential legacy?
Lauren, I think everybody maybe has a desire to write a book at some point in time. I certainly have. I've always been,
Okay.
I've been a fan of U.S. history, anything dealing with the presidents, the states, and a lot of fascinating books about the U.S. presidents. But I tried to, based on prose and poems, just trying to take a different approach and love the writing opportunity. And I actually just started the book in the first week of December and published Verse and Valor in January. So kind of an exciting
you wrote
road.
the book. How many pages is it?
It is in the range of about 80 pages, I believe. Actually, 95 pages all the way through the end of the book.
Okay. So does it have pictures? Because I'm a big so every guy that's mentioned, the president and everything.
Every chapter, the chapter number is actually the number of the president that they serve.
Oh, wow.
It's got it's in black and white, so black and white pictures of all the presidents and all the details about nicknames, how long they served, their age, family, interesting facts, and then of course the verses of prose talking about how they served as president.
And I on everybody needs to get this book, and but if you leave the bottom, it's I don't know, it's chronological order, but it's interesting that you have George Washington, Lincoln, JFK, Ronnie, my fav, and then Obama, and I don't want to call him Goober, but Biden. So, but at any rate, I mean, yeah, I mean, so how did you how did you kind of approach the task, which kind of leads me into all that, of capturing the essence of each of the presidency's legacy in kind of a poetic form? Because there's so much political background of these guys. How did you kind of just format that into poetic format?
It really began, Lauren, with the research, researching on facts and figures, a lot of different resources that I went out to about family and legacy and what they taught, their speeches, what they believed, and then all the details, political affiliation, not only that, but their religious affiliation, their kids. Then I used quite a bit of AI for research and especially Chat GPT to show proof of concept and accuracy of the facts, because a lot of the book is based on facts. I mean, the poetic writing is there, but I wanted to make sure I was accurate on the facts and the figures and all of the details put into the work.
So let's define poetic format. Okay, roses are red, violets are blue. Shame on me for asking you. I mean, so what?
You
Yeah,
nailed it right there. You
yeah.
nailed it
So what
right
is the
there. Yeah.
poetic form to describe a presidency?
Yeah, well, prose is based on normally it could be 4 to 6 different stanzas, sentences. And normally it does in most cases. The second sentence has a particular word that then the fourth sentence will end and rhyme on. And that makes it a matter of prose. Some poetic writers don't always follow that essence. It might be longer writing, but I just chose to go by the standard of 4 sentences, 4 verses, with the words, having a good rhyme and a good meaning coming
Oh,
together. And that's a
that's
little bit of a challenge,
oh,
to bring the details and all the details, facts, dates, figures, things like that, and then do it in a poetic form. But it really, once you begin writing, it was a lot of fun. I mean, it
so.
just really began
Give me a,
to
for
flow.
instance, with George Washington. Give me some kind of a poetic format with Georgie.
George Washington. Let's talk about George Washington. In a land forged anew, the first president arose. Washington's verse inaugurating presidential legacy glows from Mount Vernon's grace to Potomac's flowing tide, guiding a nation through freedom's sacred stride. I'll read the last stanza from the father of a nation. These teachings spring a presidential legacy, an eternal thing, inspirational guidance, both young and old, inaugurating a story of greatness, which continues to be told. And
Wow.
then, throughout it would be, famous quotes, different dates, uh, particular Valley Forge is in there. The Constitution is in there. Philadelphia Hall, Valley Forge, all the details of his life, what he's known for, blended through the poetic writing
Well,
for each of
it's
the
interesting
presidents.
because you really captured the essence of George by the poem because of his valor, if you will, to be a historical monument on Mount Rushmore, and the list goes on about I think your format of poetic forms, because you could spend a lot of time talking about the political history. Your book could be quadrupled, if you will, in content because of the political history of each president. The colonies. The list goes on, and then you could almost get into the religious wars of the
Right,
Maccabees, right? but,
right,
but
right.
but we won't go that far. But I think that that's a really neat and very significant way to describe each of the presidents, because with a reader, correct me if I'm wrong. Because at times I thought about writing the Go Biz Guy a book, and I thought about taking every episode that I have and putting it in written format. Nothing significant good about that. I'm making comments, but so I think the format pick of choosing the essence of each presidency by poetic form is really a contribute to you, and going that way. I've never heard anybody picking that genre.
No, and that's one of the reasons as I researched out on Amazon, looking at some of the books that were available out there, it was kind of a new approach, kind of a novel approach to, in fact, one of my readers, mother reached out to me to tell me that her son had never been interested in U.S. history, but the way it was written in poetic form, he took a liking to it, and he's learned all about the presidents, and he keeps reciting all these facts, interesting facts and figures about the U.S. presidents. So she just kind of shared that poetic format brought him to the book, or brought him to, an interest in history of the U.S.
And
presidents
just
just based on
from
that
maybe
prose.
from a sales position or marketing position, this could almost be introduced to school systems as a history book.
Well, interesting enough, I've already got the book on
Oh
the
wow,
shelves at our high
dang!
school, Ventura High School. Uh, yeah, the librarian reached out to me, and they've got several books written by authors that attended Ventura High. So both of my
Wow,
books are on the
yeah, it
shelves
is. But
now.
I think it'd be cool to actually have them as part of the curriculum in history. You know what I'm saying? I mean, it's just,
I think it'd be a very cool idea. We'll
yeah,
have to kind of talk about how to make that happen.
exactly, exactly. So, um, it's not like I've ever said to my peeps, I wish I could be a president of the United States. So, there's a lot of people out there saying, well, I could, and then there's a lot of finger pointing to, okay, well, this person could be a president of the United States or whatever. And so, um, what are some of the basic requirements to be president of the United States?
Yeah, really, Lauren, three basic requirements are found. Number one, to be a natural born citizen in the U.S. That's
Okay,
the first requirement.
just a sidebar. Then why is
Num-
Obama on here? I'm just kidding. Okay, go ahead.
you need to be kidding in that particular area. Number two, it's based on age. You've got to at least be 35 years old. And then number three, interesting, it's you have to be a resident of the
Okay.
U.S. for 14 years. So you can't necessarily be born in the U.S., leave the country, come back in to run for president. You've got to be a resident of the U.S. for
And so
14
there's
years on
no
a consecutive
requirement
basis.
of political affiliation.
No, it's all you look through the political affiliations of all the presidents, and they vary from being, Washington when there really wasn't a political affiliation, to nowadays Republican, Democrats, Independents. No particular affiliation that's
Well,
involved
it's
in the
interesting,
requirement.
just
No.
to digress a little bit. So, actually, when maybe I'm a student right now, but actually, when did the affiliation of Republican? I think I know the dates. I think I know the president, but it was past Abraham Lincoln, wasn't it, when the Republican Party got established?
Well, yeah. And
Right.
then the Federalist really was determined by both Democrat, Republican, kind of a blend of those. The Whig Party was another party that
Okay.
came up to be a substantial part of the group. Many became part of the Whig movement. And I think it was really coming in to Cleveland, Taft
Yeah.
around 26,
Okay.
27. That really there was a designation of Republican Democrats
Yeah.
on the ticket.
Yeah.
Good
I
question.
think that's a good summary because I think that's really, to be honest with you, and maybe we can talk a little bit about this, but God is in total control of our leadership, and but we have a responsibility to vote. And I just think as you look at how the United States was formed, and George Washington all the way up to Mr. Biden, it is like good, bad, or indifferent, right?
Yeah, and I don't know. I might vary maybe a little bit with God being in control of our leadership. I think God is in
Okay.
control of the process of leadership. The democratic process and that whole, the essence that came out of our declaration, forming the colonies. I think that's a part of God's process, but that's what leaves us to our free will, in making choices. And, choices can be good. They can be
Okay.
bad. They can have consequences. So I think the process, like the Roman government back in the day was,
Right.
render unto Caesar what was Caesar's, unto, God what is God's. And so showing a separation that we did have political powers in the process, but I don't mistakes
Okay.
and wrong decisions through history that many times, we're going to pay consequences for.
Exactly. And as I get older, maybe I've said this, but sometimes I just don't want to vote anymore. I just, I just it seems like I'm over politics. I'm over, Ronald Reagan is on the front cover, as I mentioned, but he was one of my favorites, and I gauge a lot of stuff by him. Not every president was criticized, right?
Yeah, I would say in most cases, but the power that we have, Lauren, to vote kind of brings us back
Okay,
to
how so?
square one. That with all the controversies and I would say all the crap going on, that opportunity that we have every so often in the years to vote, I want to continue to treasure that, make the best decision I can. and then know that I've done that. That's my foundational thing that I'll never vary from. And then, yes, I mean, I'm frustrated by other things that we see
Well,
going on
oh
within
no,
that
no,
leadership
10-4 on that. I mean,
in both in both parties. You
if
know,
we're all honest, sometimes I say to my people, I say, if we're all honest, we're all libertarians. You got to understand that, and there's no dominant libertarian running. It's either straight Republican or Democrat, and so, um, but I'm so yeah, I will always vote, and I don't have. I, I just I don't know. I have convictions that I will not vote the opposite way. There's been so
I got
yeah, there's
you.
been some people where I say, well, they're pretty good, but then I look at ideology. So anyway, what are the most interesting facts overall about the U.S. presidents, and that kind of leads me into that next question.
Oh man, I mean, there's so many. I mean, I'll share maybe a summary of some. Length of term. It's interesting. William Henry Harrison served the shortest term as president,
Wow, how come?
31 days. Um, that's a great question. How come? He actually has the other distinction of going on with the longest inaugural address that lasted a little over 2 hours. It was a rainy, wet, cold day. He got a cold. It developed into
Oh,
pneumonia that he
okay,
never
so that's the
recovered from
reason
and
why
died
it
in
didn't
31
last
days
but
after
31 days.
coming out.
Oh my gosh.
That's why he
Wow.
died. He died in office from pneumonia. Uh, on the other end, longest presidency was actually Franklin Roosevelt. Actually served into his fourth term, which was, this is interesting history, Lauren, because George Washington, after his second
Sure.
term,
Right.
again, he was the most popular president, of course, being number one. He's the only president in history with the votes. Everybody voted for Washington. He was a national hero, but he was asked after a second term to run for a third term. And he said, I'm not, because the colonies had just come out of this
Right.
British
Yeah.
monarchy rule. And he said, we need to set a new precedent that leadership should be limited to 2 terms. It wasn't a law, but he created a precedent that extended through 32 terms until Franklin Roosevelt. But when you think about what was going on in the world around the time that Roosevelt
Yeah.
served, we're coming out of the Great
Hmm.
Depression. Germany is advancing on Europe. World War II looks like it's on the forefront. The, U.S. is concerned. Roosevelt brought a sense of calmness and security that I think the U.S. needed at that time to go into that third term, which was a calming,
Right.
impact for the
Uh-huh.
U.S. But once he went into his fourth term, then it was Congress started saying, we got to put a limit on this. And that's when actually the 22nd Amendment was passed to limit. This is in 1951. Roosevelt was still in his term. And in the amendment, they said you can finish your term, but it's going to be limited to 2 terms
Hmm.
from that point forward. And
It
that was really
it is
interesting
interesting
how
because
that came about.
it's just kind of a sidebar. I don't know where this leads us, but when you look at terms, you look at strategies and ideologies, and what happens is they get thrown into the mix, and they say one thing as they're running for presidency and do another thing, and then when we come to a unbalanced budget or fiscal responsibilities or something, everything changes. And then for 8 years, they run amok. And then we get a new president that has conservative issues or whatever. And then he turns the knob the other way and he's done for 2 terms. And then it seems like it goes back and forth like a ping pong ball. And there's nothing concrete done in terms of how a president rules.
Yeah, and hopefully, in the near future, hopefully we'll see some changes. I don't know if that will really happen, as far as terms. It's interesting also, there is one president that actually served, we're looking at Trump on the eve of wanting to serve
Right.
another term. Grover Cleveland was actually our 22nd president. He served 1 term, was defeated, and then actually came back after as the 24th president. So there was a gap in between. Actually, Benjamin Harrison was the 23rd president in between Grover Cleveland coming in, and he did serve 2 terms, but they were not
Wow.
consecutive, which is very
So it
interesting
seems
in
like
history.
there was really a challenge for you to kind of to write a lot of this stuff. What seemed to be the most challenging story of a president?
Most challenging, I think, would be, several Nixon,
Problems?
just by virtue of his
Yeah.
resignation because of Watergate. But then on the other hand, Lauren, that's when I approached the book, I wanted to try to approach it from a non-political, divisive, and try to keep a balanced approach of the good that was accomplished during their term. And I think that tone, I've been confirmed that tone is pretty well set, but because Nixon, even a lot, especially on the international stage, relationship with China was expanded, which was really good during that time.
Right.
Biden was a challenge to write, especially with what's going on, with our economy and different challenges like that. Equally so with Trump. I mean, some of those were a little bit of a challenge to write. Clinton with some of the
I'll
challenges that
bet.
he went
Right.
through. And again, I never wanted to approach it in a negative way. So really, when it came to Clinton and Trump, I stayed
Good
out
for
of
you.
the
Yeah.
affairs. I mean, I just stayed out of
Good
that
for you
stuff
because yeah.
because
I,
it just didn't need to be there. It doesn't help anything. And here's one other thing very interesting in the writing
okay.
of the book. And this would be true, there are a lot of extremes in
Yes. Hmm.
politics. And I had a lot of people even upset about the faces I put on the
Really?
cover. I have people that I have a good friend that actually said, I'm not going to read the book anymore. And I said, well, why
Yeah.
not? I mean, he's a good friend. And he said, I just didn't like what was written about some of our presidents. And I asked which ones. Well, they were all the opposite party of his. And,
Yeah.
and so, there are
Yes.
extremes in politics. And I tried to tell people, don't read from that viewpoint. Read from an appreciation of the office of president and respect for the position and the challenge that being in that particular role has. And that's how I tried to write the book. And I mean, there's some incredible, and that's what I love the most about the writing, incredibly interesting facts about the presidents that are just amazing. That, little particular things. Thomas Jefferson was a profound inventor. And it's Jefferson that actually designed, credited with inventing the
Right.
first swivel
Wow.
chair. I'm sitting in a swivel
Yeah.
chair, in my office. You may be too, I don't know. But he was the one that invented that. He sat in one of the chairs he invented in the writing of, I think, a pretty
Yes.
important document, the Declaration of Independence. So again, just, some interesting things that you
Those are
look back
fascinating, and
over
my
in
hats off to you
history.
because I think if I wrote that book, I would probably put the spin on the opposite party, and I would no pun intended, but I would trump the other side, and then it would become a what I want to say laissez faire book because
Exactly. And
because
I
yeah.
even asked some particular readers to give me feedback on that. So I sent out an ebook ahead of time
Hmm.
on a group that I wanted to kind of go through and just read it
Hmm.
and push back. If there's areas, and I knew I was trying to pick a blend of Democrats and
Sure.
Republicans to get honest feedback, and to be honest, I did change.
Okay.
I changed a few maybe perceptions of the presidents that needed to be changed to have to keep it with a balanced, positive
Yeah,
approach.
and like I said, kudos to you for doing that because there's got to be some interesting and like you said, there's some interesting tidbits about probably each person or each president. So share some fascinating facts about the president that readers might want to find surprising.
Well, let me look at some others. I think about Washington for sure. I mentioned was voted unanimously. Second president Adams was actually the first president to live in the White House. In fact, his wife
Oh
Abigail
wow.
was known to
Okay.
hang the laundry in the East Room. James Madison the fourth was actually the shortest, 5 feet 4 inches, 100
Did not know
pounds.
that, right?
Very, very, no, very small gentleman. I think you may know the tallest, based on history of
Yeah, right.
stature, was Abraham Lincoln. Actually, another foot taller at 6 foot 4. As we're talking about size, um, again, Teddy Roosevelt was one of the largest presidents at the time, but
Oh,
people
really?
think, but it was actually William Taft
Dang.
that was the heaviest president, 350 pounds. In fact, they had to they remodeled the White House, especially the bathroom. They commissioned, interesting, Lauren, they commissioned a Manhattan company to design a new bathtub. And the bathtub, before it was installed in the White House, 4 full size men sitting in this tub, just, just to promote,
The
just
company.
to promote
Yeah.
Yeah, promote the company.
Yeah.
And another fact, we talk about Trump today being arrested. There's actually another president who was arrested in history.
Who's that?
Franklin Pierce
Okay.
was actually arrested running over a woman while riding his horse, and he was drunk at the time. Maybe DWI would be, maybe
Yeah.
RWI, riding while
Yeah.
intoxicated. The officers did not even recognize him when they arrested him. And then once they found out, again, as the story goes, that he was released without any repercussions that came
Wow.
out of that in that particular situation. Again, Herbert Hoover, interesting. He and his wife spoke
Really?
fluent Mandarin Chinese. And normally they would speak in that language together so they could keep their conversations
Oh, how cool is that?
private.
So, yeah, if you go to a spa and have your pedicure done, which I encourage all men to do, I mean, they all speak in Mandarin. You don't even know what they're talking about. They might be talking about that zit on your face, right? So, yeah.
Absolutely. John Adams, interesting. John Adams had a morning ritual of going out and dipping, taking a dip in the Potomac, which would not sound like too big of a deal until you read further that he was
Yeah,
always
and I'll tell you
skinny
what, that
dipping.
was probably some cold water to dip in.
That was cold water, electricity, but he and his wife never flipped a switch because they had a fear of being shocked.
Oh my gosh. Wow. So yeah, so it kind of seems like there's a little bit of intermesh of some entrepreneurship with electric companies and some other people with the baths and everything that they benefited from the White House because of who the people were in the White House. So that's some interesting tidbits there. So
Yeah, and there's also, there's some historical things.
yeah.
I'll share one if we
Oh, we
have
got
time
plenty
to
of time.
do that.
Yeah.
There's what was called, it was called the Curse of Tippecanoe, and that really started, it was actually William Henry Harrison, that was a military officer that squashed Indian uprising. It was led by an Indian leader called Tecumseh, that was killed in that particular skirmish. And it was Tecumseh's brother, an Indian, his brother, that created what was called a curse, that Harrison would die in office. And every 20 years, any president divisible by 20 years would die while they're in office.
Wow.
So think about these dates. This started in 1840. In 1840, Harrison did die in office. 1860, 20 years later,
Okay.
Abraham Lincoln
Right.
died in office, assassinated. 1880, 20 years later, James Garfield assassinated in office. 1900, William McKinley assassinated in office. William Harding, 1920, died in office. 1940, Franklin Roosevelt died in office. Probably the most well-known, 1960, that is John F. Kennedy, assassinated in office. And now it was interesting. We come into 1980.
Yes.
In that year, Jimmy Carter's in power, and he was asked about this curse, and he kind of blew it off and said, I'll continue to serve the American people until I'm not able to, which was, it was a great statement. But then if you remember Reagan in 80, who came in 80, had an assassination
attempt,
a shooting.
Yep.
That was very serious at the time. He actually, lived through that to break, they say, to break that curse. It was even reported that First Lady Nancy Reagan even hired some, physics and astrologers to try to, kind of work against that particular curse that was out and about. But again, we're thankful Reagan lived through it. George W. Bush, was in the year of 2000 that lived through that. But it was interesting how that curse started out. And it was interesting. It was even Reagan that when he was in the hospital, people don't know how serious that shooting was. Not only the gunshot, but also his age at the time, 69, 70, going in for surgery. Yeah. And he made the point, which kind of lightened the atmosphere as he's going in to the surgery room. Reagan's always known for his great humor. And he asked the surgeons, I hope none of you are Democrats. Or I think it was actually, Lauren, I think it was actually the opposite. I hope all of you are Republicans, as they wheeled him in, which they talked about really lighten the atmosphere of how serious it was for him to be able to get through that surgery. And we're thankful in history he was able.
Yeah, that's so. Each president, because of their personality and demeanor, how did you kind of ensure that each president's guiding principles and noteworthy achievements were accurately represented in your book?
Yeah, I mean, that's a great question. I mean, that I will tell you that was a challenge. I think number one was the type of research that I did to be very careful of what was writing. That was number one. Number two, most importantly, really my sister Denise. My sister Denise is my editor, and she has got a prolific talent, not only with the words, such a great wordsmith and great at articulation and prose writing. She was incredibly important, early on in making sure that things were accurate and proofing and context and all that. And Lauren, I would even have to add some of my early readers. One example, I had an early reader that questioned me about one of the president's VPs at the time, that he said, you need to recheck your facts, which I did. I was very good and very, trying to be very accurate, but he was actually correct. And I have since made a change with one particular president. And I would even mention, which is very interesting, another reader mentioned about John F. Kennedy. I mean, everybody knows his kids, Caroline and John Jr., and I think most of the population knows that they had their first child was Arabella. And Arabella actually died. She was stillborn. A lot of people don't know that, but a lot of people do. That's a part of history, 3 children. And that's what I printed in the first publishing. And he said, you don't know they had a 4th child. And I said, I don't read that anywhere. He said, you need to check further, sent me some links. And sure enough, it was very interesting. A lot of people that died 2 days after birth, RDS, respiratory illness. And really out of that has spurred research development in some of our advances in neonatal care, premature infants, that's where that RDS kind of originates with a premature baby. But a lot of good that came out of that. So I listened to my readers and, make changes where it's needed. Nothing since that time. That's been probably 3 months in publication since I've got a couple comments.
Yeah. So that kind of leads me. So the book only been in publication for 3 months?
January. It was actually published the end of January.
So what's the format that people are buying the book in?
Normally it's ebook, and let me just compliment you. Since you sent out the announcement that we were going to do a podcast, my ebook spiked. Yeah. It was interesting. I happened to do a zero ebook during Memorial Day weekend. So this all aligned really good for your readers. But I would count, Lauren, to be honest, probably 38 ebooks
that's awesome.
based on your listening group.
That makes me feel good. Yeah.
Yeah. So it was free. Yeah, absolutely. It was free for them to be able to download it. I think you motivated them to go out
Awesome.
and
That's
check it
good.
out. So it was
That
a
made
win-win
my
for
day
all of
right
us.
there. So yeah, yes, it does. Yeah.
So I
I mean,
appreciate it. The word does get out. And that was just based on your
yep,
I think
that's
your
it.
Facebook
I
notice
think I put
about
it
the
on
upcoming podcast.
one of my biggest audiences on LinkedIn. Um, so I think, but both of those, I didn't do
Oh,
anything
very
else,
good.
but who
Okay.
knows? I push it out, like I said, to about 100,000 people every Thursday. So, there's some trickling effect, no doubt about it. So, um, and so reading this whole thing, and we talked about the principles, but um, what are some of the probably most notable patterns of observation found in this data, if you understand the question?
As far as the patterns of in a particular area,
Yeah.
ages or
Yeah,
political,
all the
religious.
above. So how do you
Um,
like, what were the most notable observations that you made?
yeah, really good question. I think
Okay.
probably let's go with age. Youngest president. Now, keep in mind, this is Theodore Roosevelt, Teddy Roosevelt. He's the youngest to notice the word I'm using, assume the presidency at the age of 42. He
Yes.
assumed after Abraham Lincoln
Right.
was killed. Oh no, no, actually, I'm sorry. This
Okay.
is when McKinley was assassinated. So he was the youngest at 42 to assume, but it was actually Kennedy that was actually elected. And Kennedy, JFK,
Oh,
was actually 43 when he became elected. Clinton, 46, Obama, 47. But yeah, interesting. Theodore Roosevelt, assuming at 42, but elected would be JFK.
yeah.
Oldest president
Right.
is really Biden
Uh-huh.
at 78. Before that, it was Trump at 70.
Uh-huh.
Reagan before that at 69. Um, Yeah, and I would mention, when you talk about
Right.
religious affiliation, most of the presidents have shown to be Protestant Christians. In fact, JFK was actually the first and only Roman Catholic president before Biden. And I think as I read
Yes.
back, I think many of the presidents, I think Jimmy Carter's a great example.
Right.
We're really Baptist. I think it showed up
Yes.
in
Yes.
his decision making, his Christian faith, his social justice. I mean, we saw pictures of Jimmy Carter building habitat homes up until his 90s.
Yes. Right.
I mean, what a good man in his work in social justice. But here's an interesting fact. Thomas Jefferson. Now, I mentioned most were Protestant Christians. There are no presidents that showed or publicly said they were an atheist,
Oh, really?
which they,
Okay.
well, I think as we go back, founding fathers, all men are, all the different
Right.
things that the colonies were built on would not probably allow that. But several came out as
Oh,
deist.
okay.
In other
Yeah.
words, they believed in the creator, they believed in God, but they really didn't go as far to believe maybe in Jesus Christ, or more importantly, in his miracles and,
Hmm.
resurrection and things like that. And it was interesting. Thomas Jefferson actually began writing. I think there were two different versions. There's no print copies of the first version, but his second version, which became known as the Jefferson Bible, he started cutting and pasting the King James version, took out what he liked,
Oh,
and left out every
wow.
reference to Jesus Christ,
Yeah.
miraculous, the gospels, the resurrection, anything about the deity of Christ, he left
Thank you.
out.
I was
Good
going to
news
ask
is
that.
never got
When did it
published.
get published? Uh-huh.
Never got published, but thankful for him
Yes.
about his writing of the Declaration of Independence, and glad that things didn't go further
I've heard
with
of
the
the
Jefferson
Jefferson Bible,
Bible.
but I didn't know how it
Interesting enough.
originated and everything. That's quite interesting. Yeah. Um, so religious was an important aspect of their lives, and I think sometimes not to be judgmental, and as I mentioned, I need to focus more on passion than I do, not degrading someone, but I think a lot of times when people or leaders like this tout being a Christian, I think that uh, and like you said about Jefferson, they don't they believe in the deity, right? And they believe in God, but they don't believe in how you're going to get to heaven and focus on that. So why do you think presidents want to just affiliate themselves with the Protestant religion?
I don't know if I have an answer to that question, but in what you talked about them varying from their particular positions, I think a lot of it is in the politics. I mean, trying to appease constituents. I just think about, and again, not to pick on anybody, and I haven't. I mean, I
Okay,
voted for Jimmy Carter at the time. I thought he was the best man, at the time. So I've always tried
okay,
to
good
have a
for
very
you.
balanced approach. And again, with that statement, I know that you'll know, those on your podcast will
Right.
know I normally vote Republican, but I want to vote for the best man. But I think in some areas of politics, I think about Biden being a Roman Catholic, and then maybe some of the viewpoints about abortion
Right.
and how late in term that would be allowed, and just different viewpoints. I think that is a challenge. And I think it takes a strong commitment to faith to really stand your ground on your faith, um, without politics moving you, or the winds of politics and constituents in the media moving you back and forth to different positions. So I have a high regard
Yeah,
for those that are
I
able to do that.
in your
That are able to do
findings,
that.
were you
So, and
ever
I know it's a
was
challenge.
there ever a president that at maybe a congressional meeting or maybe a public meeting where he actually bowed his head and prayed that God would bless this meeting and thank you in Jesus' name?
Yeah, I mean that went back to Abraham
Okay.
Lincoln. I mean that really goes back to the founding fathers about the new colonies being created under the hand of God. I mean it was spoken of in the direction that all men are created equal under God, and so I think that essence was there with the founding fathers. And I think throughout history, several presidents, I think just off the top of my head, George, both H.W. and
Mm-hmm.
W., the son, both talked about
Mm-hmm.
the importance of praying and, coming together and having faith and all of that. Of course, Jimmy Carter,
Right.
probably one of the
Yeah.
best known in that particular area of faith. But
Yeah.
I know it's a challenge, and I know it impacts their decision making in many cases. And the stronger their faith, I think the stronger decisions that they will have to make, even if it's politically unpopular with their
It
particular
is
group.
interesting. I mean, I probably could spend almost 2 hours talking about some politics and the essence of each leadership and the content and the background in which they worked, et cetera, et cetera. But how do you hope that the verse and valor will contribute to current conversations about American leadership and unity? How is that? What's your thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, Lauren, such a great question. I mean, I just wanted to contribute, hopefully in a nonpartisan way, to bring us together in a way to talk about the importance of the U.S. presidents, the positive, contributions that all of them have made to the world that we live in today, and maybe have a greater appreciation for presidents and what they accomplished. Not only the fun things, the interesting facts that are kind of fun to read, but also the important decisions that were made, the years that they made those decisions, how they contributed to the U.S. as we know it today, and just maybe have a better appreciation for the position
Well, one of the
in the
things
place
that
of U.S.
brings to my
presidents in our
mind
history.
is that I look at tragedy in this country, and maybe I'm not a historian like you are because you know a lot, but when we have a tragic like 9/11, and we had World War II or World War One, World War Two. Some claim we're on the verge of World War Three, but wars are not. They're never won. They're always based on men's egos and everything. Um, I'm just wondering how do we come to grips with a conversation across the aisle without bickering? Because at 9/11, was it the Senate or Congress got on top on in front of the White House and stood together in unity,
Right.
and they locked arms, and it's the only time in history that we saw that due to the tragedy. I hope and pray that we don't have another tragedy, but I hope that your book soars and it gets in the hands of everybody possible, because I have some ex relatives, and that they won't even talk to me because they know I'm on the other side. And then when people
Right.
do talk politics, they don't understand what your book, Verse and Valor, mentions. Everything positive about something. I mean, when you look at Biden, everybody like rips him up and down, and he's a target. And but I'm sure that he's got some positive things about him. And so I think you're spot on by taking you know the whole process of the presidency, and you name some really Trump and some other people that were always in the limelight because of things. So, what do you really want the readers to take away from Verse, Valor, Poetic Reflections on the President's Legacy after they finish the book?
Yeah, Lauren, I think just to appreciate, not only the history, the facts of the presidents, knowing that they, in most cases they were married, they had a family, they had political affiliations, to know, a lot of the details. And like I said, to know the contributions that they made. But I'm just hoping that it'll be a reminder, of our nation's history. We don't always do
Yes.
things right, but we the discourse in a national tragedy. I hope it doesn't take another national tragedy to bring us together. I still remain optimistic that our best days are yet ahead, and I hope that is found to be true.
Amen. And I yes, I just think that we, despite you know despite how things turn out, it's very difficult. We're told to pray for our leaders, and we're told to pray for their guidance and everything. And I think
Absolutely.
left or right, middle of the road. I think if we do that, I think that we probably step aside maybe some of the negativity. I mean, but we can't. I mean, I've got relatives that are so pro Republican and some that are pro Democrat that you don't talk about religion or politics in the same room. And and your book is kind of a glue that holds everything together. And I thank you so much for this opportunity to share your book, and it's just a great thing that you've done, Archie. And God's given you the skill, the knowledge, and you've done well with your research. So thank you so much, Archie, for the time together.
Thank you, Lauren. I appreciate you, brother. Appreciate our friendship, and I hope it'll be a blessing to your audience if they do pick up
Oh, it
pick up the
oh
book.
it will. It will. So you take care and hang on for just a minute, okay?
Okay, take care, Lauren. Be
Uh-huh.
blessed.